On a chilly spring morning in Charleston, South Carolina, the pastel houses of Rainbow Row glowed softly in the first light of day. At the corner of East Bay Street, a small girl stood beside a pink bicycle with a wicker basket filled with paper daisies. Her sign, hand-lettered with a child's determination, read, "Selling my bike." Mommy needs money for food. She was only 7 years old, but her chin was lifted high, her eyes steady even as her hands trembled. A luxury Mercedes eased to a stop in front of her, the sound of its engine foreign against the worn sidewalk. Out stepped a man in a tailored navy suit, polished shoes clicking against the pavement. He was Daniel Pierce, a wealthy CEO whose name was splashed across business journals, a man used to numbers and contracts not heartbreak on a street corner. What happened in the next 5 minutes would change his life and hers forever. Before I tell you more, I want to hear from you. If you saw a child selling her most precious possession just to feed her mom, what would you do? Tell me in the comments, because what Daniel chose to do next may surprise you. The girl's name was Lily Carter. Her blonde hair was tied back with a ribbon that had lost its color, her sneakers scuffed and patched. But she stood with the quiet courage of someone far older. "How much are you asking for your bike?" Daniel asked, crouching down so he wouldn't tower over her. His voice, usually sharp in boardrooms, softened without him meaning it to. Lily's reply came steady, though her eyes glistened. "Maybe $50, sir?" "My mommy says we only have $19 left until Friday. I heard her crying last night. I just want to help." The words pierced him. $50 a lunch bill for him, a lifeline for her. His throat tightened as he stared at the pink bike, clearly loved and cherished its faded paint, still gleaming under the morning sun. Daniel's chest ached with a sensation he had long forgotten. He pulled his wallet from his pocket thumb, brushing past platinum cards until he found 4 crisp $100 bills. He held them out to her. "I think $300 is fair for a bicycle like this." Lily's eyes widened in disbelief. She hesitated as if unsure if it was a trick. Then, with sudden courage, she flung her arms around his neck. Daniel froze at the contact, stunned by the warmth of her small embrace. No one had hugged him in years. For a moment, the world went quiet except for the sound of a child whispering, "Thank you, sir. Mommy will be so happy. We can buy food now." He gently pried her hands from his shoulders, blinking against a rush of emotion. "What's your mother's name?" he asked, though some inner instinct already warned him. "Natalie Carter?" Lily answered, rocking back on her heels. She worked at a big office, but they told her she couldn't come back. She cries every night. The name hit Daniel like a lightning strike. Natalie Carter. He knew it too well. It wasn't just an employee's name, it was a name connected to a decision he had signed only weeks before. His mind raced the girl's words, echoing like a verdict in his head. He had dismissed her mother without hesitation, a line item in a layoff report, a casualty of numbers that had felt abstract at the time. And now, here was the consequence in flesh and blood, a child on a street corner selling her most treasured possession for food. Daniel lifted the bicycle into his trunk, but the weight felt heavier than steel. He glanced at Lily running back toward her building, clutching the bills like treasure. His chest clenched at the sight of her vanishing inside, shouting for her mother. He stood for a moment in the quiet of East Bay Street, the painted houses behind him looking more like judgment than beauty. For years he had lived in a fortress of wealth, cut off from ordinary lives, believing profit and growth were the only measures that mattered. But that morning, confronted with a 7-year-old's courage, the walls cracked. He slid behind the wheel of his Mercedes, yet for the first time in years he didn't want to drive away. He wanted answers. He needed to understand. Because Natalie Carter wasn't just a name on paper anymore. She was a mother fighting for survival, and he had unknowingly played the villain in her story. And what he was about to discover about her dismissal would shake every certainty he had ever built his life upon. Doors and a kitchen light that never goes off. The light in Natalie Carter's kitchen had become a permanent fixture, a weak glow from a single bulb that burned long past midnight. Bills covered the table laid out like a battlefield she could not win. She ran her finger down a column of numbers on a yellow legal pad, whispering totals under her breath. Rent due in 3 days. Electricity already late. Groceries bought on credit. The balance left in her checking account $19.08. Each line of ink carved deeper into her chest than the last. Natalie had been a senior financial analyst at Pierce Analytics for nearly 4 years. She had never missed a deadline, never received a poor review. In fact, her last evaluation called her one of the company's most reliable assets, and yet 3 weeks earlier she was summoned to HR, handed a termination notice citing financial misconduct, and escorted out of the building under the eyes of coworkers who now looked at her as though she were a thief. No explanation. No chance to defend herself. Just gone. She had tried to fight back. She left voicemails that were never returned. She sent emails that bounced to automated replies. She stood at the front desk in the glass lobby of Pierce Analytics and begged to see anyone who would listen. Security told her she was trespassing. HR told her everything must go through legal channels. Legal told her she would need an attorney, and attorneys told her they required a retainer she could never afford. Doors closed one by one until she stopped knocking because the humiliation was worse than the silence. That same week, Daniel Pierce was in his corner office high above the harbor, staring at a spreadsheet of quarterly numbers. The morning after meeting Lily on East Bay Street, he had searched his email for the name that would not leave his mind, Natalie Carter. It didn't take long to find it. The termination report glared back at him from the screen. Employee ID 021 terminated for embezzlement. But as he scrolled, his brow furrowed. There was also an Amanda Cortez ID 02 fired the same day, numbers too close together. The same week the company upgraded its HR software. His chest tightened. He requested the raw migration log. The file was dense full of codes and timestamps, the kind of technical record most executives never bothered to open. But Daniel forced himself to read. And there it was, a transposed digit. Natalie's employee ID had been confused with another analyst's, someone genuinely guilty of stealing from petty cash. A single error, 1 digit out of place, and her life had collapsed. Daniel sat back in his chair, staring at the screen as nausea rose in his throat. He remembered signing off on the termination batch. He hadn't looked closely at the names. He had trusted the process, trusted the software, trusted HR. He had treated them like numbers on a page, nothing more. And now he could see what that choice had cost. Natalie Carter wasn't a number. She was the mother of a little girl who had been willing to sell her bike for food. Meanwhile, in the small apartment on Harborview Road, Natalie moved like a shadow. She sold jewelry she had inherited from her grandmother. She pawned her wedding ring, long since stripped of meaning. She made peanut butter sandwiches for Lily night after night, pretending it was a game, calling them midnight picnics, even though the girl's stomach growled louder each day. She laughed during the day so her daughter would not see her cry at night. She borrowed a violin from Lily's music teacher because she refused to let poverty cancel her daughter's lessons. To Natalie, dignity was not about having money. It was about protecting her child's right to dream. But there was only so much she could shield. When the landlord taped a notice on the door, Natalie ripped it down before Lily could see, but her hands shook as she stuffed it into a drawer. When the school called about Lily's overdue lunch account, she pretended it was a billing error. When her mother in Savannah asked if she needed help, Natalie lied and said they were fine. Pride and shame twisted together until she could hardly breathe. Daniel couldn't get the image of Lily's eyes out of his head, blue and bright, filled with a mixture of innocence and resolve no child should have to carry. He saw her face reflected in the polished glass walls of his office. He heard her words, "We only have $19 left," echoing between every line of a financial forecast. That night, unable to sleep, he drove past the Harborview complex. He parked across the street, engine off, and watched through the glow of the second-floor window as Natalie sat at her kitchen table, head bowed over papers. A small lamp burned beside her. From time to time, she pressed her hands to her face. Then, as if sensing she was being watched, she rose and walked to Lily's bedroom. Through the thin curtains, Daniel saw her kneel beside the bed, smoothing the girl's hair, kissing her forehead, before turning back into the dim kitchen. He drove away with his chest on fire. For the first time in his adult life, Daniel Pierce, the man whose name symbolized power and success, felt the weight of failure, not for missing a financial target, but for destroying lives with a signature he had never questioned. He could blame HR. He could blame the software vendor. But in the end, he knew the truth. The mistake had happened on his watch, and the silence that followed had been by his design. Natalie Carter was right. They hadn't just fired her. They had erased her. And unless he acted, she would remain invisible, another casualty of a system built for efficiency, not humanity. As Daniel gripped the steering wheel at a red light, he knew he couldn't undo what had been done. But he also knew one thing with absolute certainty. If he didn't make it right, he would never again be able to look at that little girl or himself in the mirror. Daniel Pierce had signed contracts worth millions, shaken hands with governors, and spoken on stages where the spotlights burned hot enough to make weaker men sweat. But nothing, not a single boardroom battle or acquisition deal, had prepared him for standing in front of apartment 2B on Harborview Road with a bouquet of white lilies in one hand and a knot in his chest so tight it nearly strangled him. He knocked softly, half hoping no one would answer, half terrified someone would. When the door opened, Natalie Carter stood there, framed by the dim light of the apartment. She looked smaller than he remembered, her sweater fraying at the cuffs, her green eyes ringed with exhaustion. Yet, even in weariness, she carried herself with a quiet strength that unsettled him. She didn't invite him in. She didn't smile. Her hand gripped the edge of the door, as though she might slam it shut at any second. Miss Carter, Daniel began, his voice lower than usual. "I owe you an apology, one that no words can really cover." Natalie's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering in them. "You're the CEO," she said flatly. "Pierce Analytics. My daughter told me about you, the man who bought her bicycle." Daniel swallowed hard. "Yes, that was me. And I came today because I need to tell you the truth. You were fired by mistake. A clerical error. A single wrong digit in a system update. And it cost you your job, your reputation, your security. It never should have happened. I didn't catch it, and I signed off on it. That's on me." The silence that followed was so heavy he thought he might drown in it. Natalie's jaw tightened, but her voice was steady. "Do you have any idea what the last 3 weeks have been like for us? Do you know what it feels like to be escorted out of a building as though you've stolen something when all you've ever done is give your best? My daughter has been going to bed hungry. Mr. Pierce, $19 in the bank. That's what your error left us with." Daniel felt each word like a blade. He had prepared a dozen explanations, but none of them mattered here. Excuses sounded like betrayal. "You're right," he said finally, "and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I do want to make it right." He extended an envelope toward her. Inside was a letter offering her reinstatement, a 30% salary increase, full back pay, and a written correction to clear her record. For any other employee, this would have been more than enough. But Natalie didn't even reach for it. "Why now?" she asked sharply. "Why come here with flowers and an offer?" "Because you're afraid I'll sue. because the press might get wind of what happened. No, Daniel said quickly, shaking his head. Because your daughter stood on a street corner trying to sell her bicycle for food. Because I saw the kind of courage and love in her eyes that made me realize what this mistake really cost. Because I can't sleep at night knowing my company destroyed your life. Her gaze flicked past him to the parking lot where his midnight blue BMW glimmered beneath the streetlight. For a moment, he saw a crack in her defenses, something raw and wounded behind her composure. Then she straightened, crossing her arms tightly. You say you want to make it right, Natalie said. But how do I know you won't fire me again the moment it's convenient? How do I know this isn't just corporate damage control? Daniel had faced lawsuits, government audits, hostile investors. Yet her blunt challenge was the first time in years he felt unsteady on his feet. You don't know, he admitted. All I can do is give you my word. But if that isn't enough, then tell me what would be. Natalie studied him for a long time. He expected her to slam the door. Instead, she stepped back just slightly enough to reveal a child's voice from inside. Mom? Who's at the door? Lily appeared, her blonde hair tied in messy pigtails, her eyes lighting up when she saw him. It's the man, Mommy, the one who gave me money for my bike. She ran forward, clutching his arm with both small hands. Did you bring it back? Did you keep it safe? Daniel crouched his throat tight. I did, sweetheart. It's safe, I promise. Natalie's face softened, but only for a moment. She motioned Lily back inside and turned to him again. You want me to come back? She asked. Fine. But I have conditions. He braced himself. First, she said, her voice firm. I want a written guarantee of at least 2 years' employment. Not at HR's mercy, not at the whim of another mistake. Second, I want to report directly to you. If this company is truly changing, then let me see it with my own eyes. And third, her voice cracked slightly here, but she pressed on. Third, I want your personal assurance that no one else will ever go through what I went through. No one else will be erased like I was. Daniel didn't hesitate. Done. Every one of them. Her eyes narrowed again, skeptical. Just like that. Yes. Because you're right, my company treated you like a number and I let it happen. But if you'll let me, I want you to help me change that. Not just for you, for everyone. For the first time, Natalie's composure faltered. She looked down at the envelope still in his hand, then at the flowers, then back into his face. She seemed to be searching for the lie, but what she found instead was something Daniel hadn't shown anyone in years, genuine remorse. And something else, loneliness perhaps. Lily's small voice interrupted again. Mommy, can he stay for dinner? We made soup. It's not much, but it's good. Natalie stiffened, embarrassed. Lily, that's enough. But Daniel smiled. I'd be honored. That night, he sat at their small kitchen table, his suit jacket draped over the back of a chair that wobbled slightly on one leg. He ate simple soup and bread, while Lily chattered about school proudly, showing him her drawings taped to the refrigerator. Natalie said little, but he noticed the way she watched him, weighing every word, every gesture. At one point, Lily leaned close and whispered, "You look sad, Mr. Daniel. Are you okay?" His voice caught. "I'm sad because I hurt you and your mommy, but I'm going to do everything I can to make it better." "You don't seem mean," Lily replied with a shrug. "You seem nice, like family." The words struck Daniel harder than any accusation ever could. He glanced at Natalie. For a second their eyes locked, and in that silence something unspoken passed between them. Natalie cleared her throat, breaking the moment. "If I come back, Mr. Pierce, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for my daughter. And if you fail us again, if you ever let this happen to another family, I won't just walk away quietly. I'll fight. Daniel nodded, his voice steady, but softer than she'd ever heard it. Then I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. And for Daniel, a man who had built an empire on numbers and contracts, it was the first agreement that truly mattered. It was a gray Thursday morning when Natalie opened the door and froze at the sight of a man she hadn't seen in almost 8 years. Michael Jennings stood there in a tailored blazer, his hair slicked back, his smile sharp as a knife. For a moment, it felt as if the years had folded in on themselves, taking her back to the day he walked out when she was 6 months pregnant, saying he wasn't ready to be a father. Now, here he was, bold as ever, standing at the threshold of the life she had built without him. "You look good, Nat," Michael said, his tone too smooth, like he had practiced in the mirror. "Motherhood suits you." Natalie's stomach nodded. "What do you want?" "Michael, just to see my daughter, and maybe talk about being a family again." Behind her, Lily appeared in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. She looked at him with the frank curiosity only children carry. "Mommy, who's this?" Natalie's voice shook, but she forced the words out. "Sweetheart, this is Michael Jennings. He's your biological father." Lily tilted her head, studying him. "Are you the man who went away before I was born?" The question landed like a punch. Michael's smile faltered. He crouched, trying to soften his voice. "I was young, I made mistakes, but I'm here now. I've got a good job in Los Angeles, a nice apartment. I can provide for you and your mom." Lily shook her head with quiet certainty. "We already have someone who takes care of us. Mr. Daniel is my real dad." The word shattered whatever facade Michael had walked in with. His eyes darkened. "Daniel Pierce," he spat, straightening. "Your boss. You mean to tell me you're letting him play?" Daddy Natalie's voice hardened. "Daniel has been here. He didn't abandon us. He didn't let Lily sell her bike on a street corner to put food on the table." "You did." Michael's tone turned ugly, the smoothness gone. "I'm her father, Natalie. Like it or not, I have rights. Maybe it's time I start exercising them." It was the beginning of a storm that swept them into a courtroom months later. Michael filed for custody, claiming he could give Lily a more stable life. His lawyers painted Natalie as opportunistic, clinging to a wealthy CEO to secure herself comfort. They dragged up her termination, twisting the story to suggest financial misconduct. They questioned her morals, her choices, even the home she had built for her daughter. Natalie sat in that courtroom with her hands clenched so tightly her nails cut into her palms. She endured cross-examinations that felt more like character assassinations while Michael sat with his expensive lawyers smirking at every word. But when her own attorney rose, supported by Daniel's resources, the picture changed. Teachers testified that Lily was thriving straight-A's creative kind. Neighbors spoke of Natalie's tireless dedication as a mother. Even Daniel's employees came forward, describing how their hard-edged CEO had softened how he left meetings early to attend soccer games, how he spoke of Lily like she was his own. Then came the testimony of Dr. Hayes, a child psychologist appointed by the court. She described Lily as secure emotionally, healthy, and deeply bonded to both her mother and Daniel Pierce. When asked how Lily referred to him, Dr. Hayes smiled faintly. She calls him her real dad. The most powerful moment came when Lily herself spoke to the court-appointed counselor. At just 8 years old, her words carried more weight than any lawyer's. "Mr. Daniel reads me stories and makes me pancakes. He comes to my soccer games and helps me with math. When I have bad dreams, he sits with me until I fall asleep. The other man makes Mommy cry. I don't want to live with him. I want to stay with my real family." It was impossible to ignore. Michael's case unraveled when evidence surfaced of his mounting debts and recent job loss exposing his true motivation: money, not fatherhood. Judge Avery, a seasoned woman with 30 years on the bench, delivered the ruling firmly. In determining custody, the court considers not only biology, but stability, love, and commitment. Mr. Jennings voluntarily abandoned his parental responsibilities for 8 years. Miss Carter has provided a loving, consistent home, and Mr. Pierce has assumed a role that fulfills every definition of fatherhood. The petition for custody is denied. Supervised visitation is granted at the discretion of the child. The gavel fell, and with it, months of fear lifted from Natalie's chest. She broke down in tears, Daniel wrapping his arms around her and Lily. Outside, the courthouse cameras flashed as Michael stormed away, his lawyer trailing behind. But Natalie didn't care about the cameras. She cared about the way Lily squeezed Daniel's hand and whispered, "We're safe now." That Sunday, they walked up the steps of the small white church at the end of Harborview Road. Daniel wasn't a man of faith, not really, but he came because Natalie wanted Lily to see gratitude in action. Inside, sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting their faces in color. Lily clutched both their hands as the choir sang, her voice rising in small, joyful hums. For Daniel, sitting there in a wooden pew, something shifted. Success had always been numbers, contracts, applause. But here, with Natalie on one side and Lily on the other, he understood success was this: being wanted, being needed, being family. On the church steps afterward, Lily twirled in her dress, laughing. "Can we go get ice cream?" she asked. Daniel glanced at Natalie, who nodded through tears that wouldn't stop. He lifted Lily onto his shoulders, her laughter carrying across the street. And in that moment, Daniel Pierce realized that redemption didn't come in courtrooms or contracts. It came in the small, ordinary miracles of being loved. That day, for the first time, he stopped feeling like a man trying to undo a mistake. He started feeling like a father. Spring came early to Charleston that year, carrying with it the scent of jasmine and the hum of cicadas even before the calendar allowed. For Daniel Pierce, the season felt like a kind of rebirth. His mansion, once silent and sterile, now echoed with the sounds of a life he had never known he wanted. Natalie humming while she cooked Lily's laughter, skipping down hallways, the quiet comfort of belonging that no amount of money had ever bought. And in his garage, covered carefully with a white cloth, waited the object that had started it all, a pink bicycle with a wicker basket and faded streamers. For months, Daniel had been working with a restoration specialist. Every evening after work, he checked in on the project, his meticulous nature pouring into details most people would have overlooked. The frame was sanded down and painted in Lily's favorite shade of pink, a soft blush that caught the light like rose petals. The chrome sparkled like a mirror. He ordered new tires with white rims, added fresh streamers in pink and silver, and tucked a small silver plate onto the handlebars engraved with words that had come to him one sleepless night. For Lily Carter, the brave girl who reminded me what family means. With love, Daniel. By the time Lily's 9th birthday approached, the bike gleamed as though it had been made for a princess. But Daniel didn't want to just give her a restored bicycle. He wanted to give her back a piece of her story, proof that sacrifices born of love can return transformed. On the morning of her party, the backyard filled with neighbors, classmates, and the kinds of decorations Natalie had once thought impossible on her tight budget balloons, streamers, and a cake taller than Lily herself. Children ran through the yard, their voices ringing like bells. Natalie watched from the porch, her eyes shining, her heart swelling with a gratitude she no longer tried to hide. When the moment came, Daniel wheeled the bicycle out from the garage. Gasps filled the yard. Lily froze her blue eyes wide, her small hands covering her mouth. For a moment, she didn't move, as though she was afraid if she blinked, the vision would disappear. "My bike," she whispered, stepping forward slowly. "It's my bike, but it's even more beautiful." Daniel knelt, steadying his voice. You gave it up because you loved your mom more than anything in the world. That sacrifice changed my life. I kept it safe for you. And now it's time it came home. Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks as she threw her arms around his neck, clinging so tightly he nearly lost his balance. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you for keeping it safe. The word slipped out naturally, and for the first time Daniel didn't flinch at it. He embraced it. Always, sweetheart. Always. The children cheered as Lily climbed onto the seat. Her legs were longer now, and Daniel adjusted the handlebars so they fit just right. She wobbled at first, then found her rhythm circling the yard with laughter pouring out of her like sunlight. Natalie stood at Daniel's side, her hand finding his. Their eyes met, and the unspoken truth settled between them. This wasn't just about a bicycle. It was about restoration, redemption. A past that had nearly broken them now transformed into a future, brimming with hope. As the party wound down and dusk settled over Charleston, the three of them stayed outside. Lily leaned her bike against the fence content to sit between them on the porch steps, her head on Daniel's shoulder, Natalie's arm wrapped protectively around her. Fireflies lit up the yard, tiny sparks against the dark. Tell me the story again, Lily said drowsily. About the day you bought my bike. Daniel smiled, his voice low. It started with a little girl who was braver than most grown-ups I've ever met. She stood on a corner with her bike ready to give up the thing she loved most because she wanted to protect her mom. She didn't know it then, but she was about to change a man's life forever. Natalie rested her head against his arm. She knew this story wasn't just Lily's anymore, it belonged to all of them, their legend, their beginning. As Lily drifted toward sleep, Daniel looked out across the yard. The bike stood like a sentinel by the fence streamers, swaying gently in the evening breeze. It wasn't just metal and paint. It was proof that even in the harshest storms, love could carve out miracles. In the months that followed, life settled into rhythms that once would have been unimaginable. Natalie pursued the MBA she had always dreamed of, Daniel adjusting his own schedule to make sure Lily was never left wanting for time or attention. Lily thrived at school, her laughter filling every corner of their home, even on Daniel's hardest days, when business pressures threatened to pull him back into old habits. One glance at the bicycle reminded him why he had chosen differently. One Sunday afternoon, Natalie found him in the garage, polishing the chrome on Lily's bike even though it hardly needed it. She leaned in the doorway, smiling. You know she's outgrowing it, right? Daniel looked up, his hands pausing. I know, but it's more than just a bike. Natalie crossed the room, resting her hand over his. So are you. He looked at her, then really looked and realized she was right. He wasn't just the man who had signed a paper that nearly destroyed a life. He wasn't just the CEO who measured worth in numbers. He was a father, a partner, a man learning every day what it meant to be part of something bigger than himself. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, Lily announced she had made a decision. When I'm older, I'm going to keep the bike forever. And someday, if I have a daughter, I'll give it to her. Because it's not just a bike, it's proof that people can change. Daniel felt his throat tighten, the simple wisdom of a child cutting through him, like truth always does. He reached across the table, taking Natalie's hand in his, holding on as though to anchor himself to the life he once thought impossible. And in that quiet moment beneath the glow of their kitchen light, Daniel Pierce knew the story wasn't about a bike or even about him. It was about love, strong enough to survive mistakes, brave enough to forgive, and enduring enough to open doors that would never close again. Life often turns on the smallest of details, a single error, a moment of courage, or a decision made in the blink of an eye. For Daniel Pierce, Natalie Carter, and little Lily, Their story was born from all three. What began with a clerical mistake that stripped a hard-working mother of her livelihood became the path to something deeper: the rediscovery of love, dignity, and the true meaning of family. Daniel started out as a man defined by numbers, contracts, and prestige. He believed his value rested in boardrooms, annual reports, and the empire he had built. But the sight of a little girl on a street corner with a pink bicycle and a cardboard sign shattered that illusion. In Lily's sacrifice, he saw not just desperation but the raw, unshakable bond of love between mother and child. It forced him to confront the consequences of decisions made from behind polished glass walls. And as the days unfolded, the hardened CEO slowly became something else: a man willing to put compassion above profit, to own his mistakes, and to rebuild trust one step at a time. Natalie's journey was one of quiet resilience. Wrongfully dismissed, humiliated in front of colleagues, and left to scrape by with barely enough to survive, she refused to surrender her dignity. She endured the sleepless nights, the empty cupboards, the endless battles against shame, not for herself alone, but for her daughter. She demanded accountability, stood firm against power, and taught everyone watching that true strength is not about never falling, but about rising with grace and determination when the world knocks you down. And then there was Lily, a child too young to carry the weight of sacrifice, yet brave enough to try. She believed selling her most precious possession might help keep food on the table. What she could not have known was that her act of love would ripple outward forever, changing the course of 3 lives. Through her innocence and honesty, she became the anchor that pulled a mother and a CEO into a family neither of them expected. The pink bicycle that once symbolized loss returned as a gift of restoration. Shining, rebuilt, and engraved with words of love, it became more than a bicycle, it became a legacy. A reminder that even from mistakes and heartbreak, beauty can be reborn. It proved that redemption is real, that healing is possible, and that the bonds we choose can be just as powerful as the ones we are born into. So what lesson can we draw from their story that our lives will be filled with moments of failure, injustice, and loss? But those moments are not the end. Like Daniel, we can face our mistakes and choose change. Like Natalie, we can stand tall when the world tries to erase us. And like Lily, we can live with such pure love that we inspire others to be better. In a world too often focused on wealth, power, and appearances, this story reminds us that true wealth is measured in love in the families we build and in the hope we refuse to give up. If this story touched your heart, let it be a reminder to live each day with compassion and courage. And if you believe stories like this matter, stories that reveal the strength of ordinary people and the beauty of second chances, please subscribe to this channel. Your support gives us the motivation to keep sharing powerful stories that inspire, uplift, and remind us of what truly matters. Because in the end, life's greatest victories are not about what we earn, but about the love we give.